Hello and welcome again to another episode of Masonic Curators. My name is Chuck Latoyle. I'm a member and historian of Montgomery Lodge in Milford, Massachusetts. I'm also a member of Masonic Curators here on YouTube and on Facebook as well. I'm an antiques dealer. I've been collecting Masonic antiques for the last 15 years and have a bit of a problem. I have quite the collection, and a few people here on this channel can attest to that. But today I want to take some time to explain a little bit about William Wallace Dudley and the magnificent, fantastic piece that he created, the Dudley Masonic Watch, also known as the Emblem Watch. First, I'd like to take an opportunity to talk a little bit about William Wallace Dudley and the steps that led to him creating this incredible design and this beautiful pocket watch. So William Wallace Dudley, he was born in St. John in New Brunswick, Canada in 1851, and by the age of 13 he was an apprentice at a local chronometer maker's shop, and by 1872 he had finished that apprenticeship. And with that knowledge, by 1875 Dudley had owned his own shop in Carlton, right outside St. John, where he remained there for about 5 years. And in 1880, Dudley moved his wife and his family and took employment with the American Waltham Watch Company in Waltham, Massachusetts. And there he was eventually hired to be a model maker, and then was eventually listed as an inspector for the company. In 1887, Dudley moved once again with his family to Illinois, where he obtained employment with the Illinois Watch Company, and he remained there for about 3 more years. And it was at this point Dudley started feeling like he wanted to learn a little bit more about watchmaking and obtain a little bit more as far as salary to, provide better for his family. So he sought to move once more to New Jersey, where in 1890 he began a tenure with the Trenton Watch Company. And about 3 years later, Dudley obtained his first patent. It was for a cyclometer, which could measure up to about 10,000 miles traveled on a bicycle. And Dudley worked at the Trenton Watch Company until 1903, and at which time he moved once again to South Bend, Indiana, where he accepted a job as superintendent position with the South Bend Watch Company. And 3 years later, guess what? Dudley moved again back to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where he was hired as a foreman for the Hamilton Watch Company. And by 1907, he rose to the title of superintendent again, and in 1908, Dudley was able to obtain his second patent for an adjustable escapement for clocks and watches. And by 1911, Dudley applied for 2 additional patents improving watch movements. Dudley continued working for Hamilton Watch Company until around 1920, where he had developed a marine chronometer, which was recognized by the U.S. Navy for its superior timekeeping standards. And while living in Lancaster, Dudley devoted much of his time to Freemasonry. There, he was active in Blue Lodge, York Rite, Scottish Rite, Tall Cedars of Lebanon, and the Nobles of the Mystic Shrine. And Dudley's love for Freemasonry and having an extensive background in watchmaking led Dudley to eventually creating the bridges and plates made from Masonic symbols and working tools. He created a prototype and applied for his patent in 1918. This prototype would lay the foundation for the Dudley Masonic pocket watches we know and love today. And Dudley was issued his first patent for a movement frame for watches in July 8th in 1919. And Dudley had enough interest in designing this watch that he ended up resigning from Hamilton Watch Company and partnered up with fellow Masons John D. Wood and George Adams to create the Incorporated Dudley Watch Company. And their first shop was set up on the 3rd floor of the Conestoga National Bank building in Penn Square in Lancaster. And in 1922, a prototype of the Dudley watch was completed, and now they were ready to go into full production. And in February of 1922, the Dudley Watch Company purchased land in Lancaster to build their new factory. The building was 2 stories plus a basement consisting of over 10,000 square feet. And Dudley, passionate about Freemasonry, hired primarily Freemasons and his family for a total of approximately 18 to 20 men. And Dudley's patent for the watch movement frame consisted mostly of bridges and plates, and the winding and setting power control mechanism. And all the other parts were outsourced from other companies such as Waltham and Hamilton watch companies. And cases for these watches were also outsourced from the Wadsworth Watch Case Company, Keystone Watch Case Company, and the Star Watch Case Company. And these cases were typically gold filled or solid gold, using either white or yellow gold. Cases either had open backs, flip backs, or hunter cases with the works covered with glass. The hands of the watch and the dials of the watch were all made to Dudley specifications, built in Switzerland. And there were quite a few different dials that were created, such as Scottish Rite dial, the Knights Templar dial, dials with different logos on them, and dials with embossed faces. The Model 1 had 19 jewels, and jewels and settings were originally done at the Dudley Watch Company, but were later outsourced to a jeweler maker in Lancaster. And in 1925, they were subcontracted to the Roth Jewelry Company in Switzerland. And in late 1922, Dudley went into production with his Model 1. It was entered into the marketplace, but was never advertised. This was believed to be because Dudley had not yet secured that patent for this watch, and he wanted that patent protection. And it wasn't until June of 1923 that he was able to secure that patent. Dudley also created a second watch movement frame design and had that patented in June of 1923, but it was never used. This one was a Shriner design, and it was believed that there were more interest in Blue Lodge members buying this than there was within the shrine, so that watch never went into production. The first model Dudley watches were all size 14 and almost Wadsworth watch cases. These watches were finally engraved and finished. The Bible was engraved on the working arbor plate on the first model with an exposed bevel pinion. Initial sales for these Model 1 watches was a little bit low, but they added some salesmen to go out on the road and do a little bit more advertising once the patent was secured. And in doing so, they were able to bring in some larger orders. But these sales were short-lived, and that's because smaller watches were coming into fashion, and larger pocket watches were becoming a thing of the past. And the wristwatch was also starting to take off, and people were beginning to want smaller size pocket watches or even move to a wristwatch. And the additional cost of making this watch was considered too expensive for the time, because back then people were only essentially making about $25 a month. These are, working class people making $25 a month. And the original Model 1, the 14 karat gold flyback cases sold for $250, which in today's market is about $4,500. And the 14 karat gold open back sold for $170, which is about $3,000 in today's money. And also the 14 karat gold filled watch was about $125, which is still about $2,250 in today's market. So due to this economic crisis, Dudley had to file bankruptcy and kind of rearrange the company a little bit and rethink this process of this Model 1. And in doing so, the Model 2s were created. They were a smaller size, which they were size 12. So, that was his attempt to keep up with the trends of the smaller pocket watches and these new wristwatches that are being created. Also, the cutbacks were that he used some cheaper materials, less fine engraving, and less fine finishing on these watches to cut corners and keep costs down. And now these new smaller Model 2 Dudleys had a few other additional changes that were made besides the cheaper materials and cheaper finishing processes. The Model 1 had that original engraved Bible that was on the winding arbor plate. This no longer was part of the process, where now they just put a white metal Bible that was soldered to the winding arbor plate, which covered the bevel pinion now. I'm assuming this was probably a cheaper process for some reason, and later on, rather than soldering these Bibles on, they made the move to rivet them on and grind and polish those rivets off so that you couldn't really tell. But it was a much more secure process. And another change that happened with these Model 2 Dudleys was that the pallet bridge was either damascened or blued rather than gilded or gold plated like the Model 1 was. And with these Model 2s, to spare some extra costs, the cases tend to be gold filled rather than solid 14 karat gold, and almost all the cases were produced by the Star or Keystone case companies at this point. And in making these kind of changes, the Model 2 was actually a little bit more popular than the Model 1. And all that being said, the market for the Dudley watch never truly materialized, and even though William Wallace tried to reinvent some of the details of the watch, it all fell flat. And by 1925, the Dudley Watch Company had to file bankruptcy. All management resigned from the Dudley Watch Company, including William Wallace Dudley. And after he resigned, he went on to work for the Hamilton Watch Company again as a finisher. And there he remained working with watches until he retired in the late 1930s. And Dudley eventually died at the age of 87 in 1938. And because of the bankruptcy, in 1925, all the property and the land associated with the Dudley Watch Company were then purchased by P.W. Baker for 27.5% of what the company's value assets were calculated at. P.W. Baker and O.D. Brubaker take over the Dudley Watch Company. And from 1925 until 1929, the company suffers from lack of sales, and the Depression was in full effect. And to try to bolster some new business within these difficult times, the owners of the new Dudley Watch Company tried to appeal to the masses with the new interest in wristwatches, and created a couple new versions of women's Dudley wristwatches. And unfortunately, these both were very unsuccessful as well. So in 1929, due to the economy and the lack of sales, Baker and Brubaker both decide to sell the Dudley Watch Company, and in doing so, they sold to J.F. Apple in June of 1929. And during the 1930s, the company had a large inventory of these Dudley watches, which were still in stock, and the sales were still extremely low. The movement parts were all sold at greatly reduced prices, and as a matter of fact, there were raffles that were created to hold fundraisers, and Dudley watches were the prize. And as a matter of fact, to show you how things declined, these new gold-filled Dudley Model 2s were now being sold as low as $15 a piece. Can you imagine? So now, with the continued decline of these watches, in 1935, the XL Watch Company, they step in and they buy all the manufactured parts, the machinery, and the equipment associated with the Dudley watches. the XL Watch Company bought these machines with the intentions of them being resold and making a profit, but unfortunately these machines couldn't be sold, and they all eventually had to be scrapped. And now this XL Watch Company has all these parts they need to do something with, so they go ahead and create the Model 3 to try to use up all these parts. And there were a few minor changes from the Model 2 to the Model 3, and one of those changes was the bridge for the third wheel was changed from a squared off top to now a rounded top to better represent the older plum style. The Bibles also had a little bit of a change. They're a little bit more rounded, and on these the rivets are more prevalent. They did not take the care that they did on the Model 2s, where they ground them almost to the point where they were imperceptible. And the XL Watch Company continued to use up all the watch parts, and in doing so they were able to make a few more Model 1s, a few more Model 2s, and roughly about 1,000 Model 3s. And they did that between 1935 and 1968. And on a side note, when the Dudley Watch Company was sold in 1925, the dies that made these Dudley emblems that you see on the backs of the watches, they've never been found. They were lost. They're somewhere. They have still yet to be found. So none of these parts could actually have been created from the original dies. So the XL Watch Company had to make these pieces from rough stock, which it proved to be way too time consuming and costly to do so. So therein lies the demise of the Dudley Watch. So because of poor record keeping, it's been extremely arduous to keep track of the serial numbers and who made what, and some that were done piecemeal. It's a little bit confusing to make sense of the serial numbers, but for the basics, the Model 1s, they were created in 1920 to 1925, and they were done by the Dudley Watch Company that William Wallace Dudley started. And those serial numbers of the Model 1 started from serial number 500 to 1900. And when P.W. Baker Company took over the Dudley Watch Company, that was between 1925 and 1935. Those serial numbers started at 2001 to about 4,800. And then when the XL Watch Company took over, started creating the Model 3s, made a few Model 1s, a few Model 2s, and about 1,000 Model 3s. Those were created between 1935 and 1976. And those particular serial numbers started at 4,801 to 6,500. And this here is one of the really fantastic Keystone cases for the pocket watch, and inside, I don't know if it shows up on video, but inside is the certification card from the Dudley Watch Company. And if not, I'll obviously have an image here for you to see. But what a fantastic case. They're rare as hen's teeth. They're so hard to come across, but I know they're out there. And if you're interested in these type of watches, there's a few resources that I've used to do some research on these and provide you with information in this video with, and it's the C. Clark Julius books. You can still find these on eBay and ABC Books, etc. But it's got some good information not only on the Dudley watches, but timepieces, watch fobs, a lot of collectibles and stuff like that. So it's a good all-around book, but it does take a little bit of time to talk about William Wallace Dudley and this Dudley watch. So these are good resources to use for the Dudley Watch, but also for anything else watch and timepiece related. Another reference book is the Dudley Watch pamphlet that was created. This is not the original, this is a reprint. I have yet to find an original, but it's a pamphlet basically describing the quality of the Dudley Watch, a little bit of the history, and good little pamphlet to have to go along with your watch if you have a collection, or you have even, you know, one piece, or you have an interest in the watch. Good little booklet to have for a resource. But one of my favorite resources for the Dudley watches, this book by Thomas W. Lindner, and I had the pleasure of talking to him and his wife a few years back, you know, after I bought this book. And this gentleman was highly dedicated to learning the history of these watches and seeking out as much information as he could on them. So this is an incredible resource if you're ever interested in finding out a little bit more about the Dudley history, the William Wallace Dudley legacy, and it's just a fantastic resource. And the image quality in this book is just phenomenal. I'm sorry for just kind of flipping through, but I mean, some of the images in the book, I don't know if it even translates on video, but an incredible buy. If you could ever find this book, please buy it. It's well worth the money. Also, another website that you could check out is Phoenix Masonry. An amazing resource for some of these, not only the watches, but antiques, collectibles, artifacts, you name it, it's on that web page. I had the pleasure of knowing the creator of that website, and unfortunately he's passed, Dave Letelier, and he was an incredible man, and with an incredible vision to pass on this knowledge. So please, I'll leave a link in the video. You can check out that website. It's so vast, it's almost difficult to navigate because there's so much information on there, but well worth the time if you can invest in that. That being said, thank you for your time. Thank you for watching the video and sticking it out. If you've gotten this far, please like, please subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We love talking about this stuff. If you guys have any ideas for future videos, please let us know. We'd love to make the video for you. We love doing the research, and you know, keep watching.